was a chilly autumn morning when Jake Thompson sat in his tiny kitchen, staring out the window at the sea of golden leaves covering his backyard. His life was far from simple, chaotic, more like it. His workdays stretched long into the night. His phone buzzed constantly with emails and messages, and the weight of responsibility pressed down on him harder with each passing day. For a long time, Jake had believed that this was the cost of success and that complexity was a sign of progress. Lately, though, something had begun to shift inside him. He felt a nagging sense that he was missing something, that the faster he moved and the more he accumulated, the less he seemed to enjoy life truly. He had money and a job that people envied, but he couldn't remember the last time he felt at peace. It was an old saying, almost a cliché, that his grandfather had lived by. Keep it simple. His grandfather, a humble man who had lived most of his life as a farmer, seemed to have it all figured out. He didn't own much, never cared for fancy things, and spent his days working the land, laughing with friends, and sitting quietly on his porch as the sun dipped below the horizon. Jake had always loved visiting his grandfather as a child. Back then, he found comfort in the simplicity of his grandfather's lifestyle, the slow pace, the quiet mornings, the joy in small things like a warm cup of coffee or the smell of freshly turned soil. But as Jake grew older, he became enamored with a different kind of life. The world told him that success meant more money, power, connections, and stuff. He bought into it, chasing after every opportunity that promised to take him further. But now, as he sat in his kitchen surrounded by everything he had worked for, Jake couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of emptiness. His days were packed, but his heart felt hollow. He couldn't remember the last time he had sat still and enjoyed the moment. That day, something inside him snapped. Maybe it was the exhaustion or the gentle tug of his grandfather's words echoing in the back of his mind. Whatever it was, Jake decided it was time to change. He couldn't keep living like this, constantly running, always overwhelmed, never at peace. Jake knew what he had to do, though it wasn't easy to admit. He had to simplify his life. The idea seemed daunting, especially in a world that thrived on complexity. But deep down, he knew it was the only way forward. So, he began. The first step was letting go of the things he no longer needed. Physical clutter, emotional baggage, and obligations that drained him. He started small, going through his house and donating things that served no purpose but to take up space. Old gadgets, clothes he hadn't worn in years, books he had never read, they all went. He felt lighter with every box he packed. Next, he turned his attention to his schedule. His calendar was filled with back-to-back meetings, networking events, and commitments that left him with little time for himself. Jake had always prided himself on being busy, believing constant activity was a sign of productivity. But now, he realized that it was doing more harm than good. He started saying no to meetings that weren't essential, to social gatherings that didn't bring him joy, and to projects that didn't align with his values. As he trimmed away the excess, Jake found himself with something he hadn't had in years: free time. At first, it felt strange, almost unsettling, to have hours of his day unplanned. But soon, he began to appreciate the quiet moments. He went for walks without his phone, sat on his porch with a cup of tea, and spent time reconnecting with old friends, friends who didn't care about his job title or how much he earned but who enjoyed his company. The more Jake simplified, the more he realized how complicated his life had become and how little he needed to be happy. He no longer cared about impressing others or keeping up with the latest trends. What mattered was the quality of his days, not the quantity of his achievements. He found joy in cooking a simple meal, reading a book from start to finish, and watching the clouds drift across the sky. While walking through the park one afternoon, Jake ran into his old friend, Sarah. They hadn't spoken in years, both too caught up in their busy lives to keep in touch. After catching up, Sarah invited Jake to a weekend retreat in the countryside. She had recently undergone a similar transformation, leaving behind the corporate world to focus on her health and well-being. Intrigued, Jake agreed to join her. The retreat was a unique experience for Jake. There were no flashy workshops, networking events, or distractions. Instead, it was a space for reflection, mindfulness, and slowing down. He started with meditation each day, followed by long walks in nature and simple, carefully prepared meals. Jake spent hours sitting in the sun, listening to the wind rustle through the trees and feeling the earth beneath his feet. He felt more alive and present than he had in years. One evening, as the group gathered around a fire, the retreat leader shared a story that deeply resonated with Jake. It was the story of a man who had spent his whole life climbing a mountain, believing that the peak held the secret to happiness. When he finally reached the top, exhausted and alone, he found nothing. Disillusioned, the man sat down, and in the stillness, he realized that happiness wasn't something waiting for him at the end of his journey. It was something he had passed by all along the way. The story struck Jake profoundly. He had been chasing after something he couldn't name for so long, thinking that success, recognition, or wealth would bring him peace. But now, he understood that peace was found in simplicity, in the small, ordinary moments of life that he had been too busy to appreciate. When he returned home from the retreat, Jake felt like a new person. The changes he had started making before felt even more urgent now. He simplified, paring down his commitments and focusing on what mattered. He realized that life didn't have to be a constant race, and that there was beauty in stillness, in doing less but being more present. Months passed, and Jake's life transformed. He wasn't as busy as he used to be, but he was happier and more fulfilled. His work improved, not because he was doing more, but because he was doing it with intention. His relationships deepened as he spent more time with the people he loved, genuinely listening and connecting. As he sat on his porch, watching the sunset one evening, Jake thought about his grandfather. He now understood what his grandfather had meant when he said, "Keep it simple." It wasn't just advice about how to live. It was a way to find peace in a world that seemed determined to complicate everything. At that moment, as the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Jake felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: contentment. Not because his life was perfect, or he had everything figured out, but because he had learned to let go of what didn't matter and focus on what did. He smiled, taking a deep breath of the cool evening air. It was simple. Life didn't need to be complicated to be beautiful. Sometimes, the most profound lessons were the simplest ones of all. Living a simple life doesn't happen automatically. It would be best to simplify your life to live. Life can become complicated if you don't take care of your physical, mental, emotional, and financial well-being and try to manage them well by keeping things simple. Humans often overcomplicate things. It's just part of our nature. However, simplicity is lovely, even though it can be challenging. Simplifying things can reduce stress and keep us focused on what truly matters. The art of keeping things simple can dramatically improve your life. It can reduce stress and give you more time for the things that you love. It can provide you with space to learn and space just to be. However, it's important to remember that just because you are simplifying does not mean it will be easy. Things will sometimes go differently than we want, leaving us feeling like something needs to be added. When this happens, our emotions can take over and lead us to make assumptions. It's important to expect that things may not always align with our desires and try to be okay with it genuinely. A simple life is often a happy life. Simplifying your life will bring you balance, freedom, joy, and peace of mind. When you eliminate the things or people that make life complicated and stressful, you will have more time and energy to focus on the things that matter most, add more value to your life, and bring you long-term pleasure. All of this will allow you to enjoy your life more. You can make the most significant impact and create value by keeping things simple. Instead of trying to say or do everything, focus on what needs to be said or done. When you can simplify something complex, you have genuinely added value. Subscribe for more videos. Thank you.